Welcome to Extension Connection on Super Talk 1270. Thoughtful information and discussion with experts from both Burleigh and Morton County Extension Service offices. Extension Connection provides advice on family nutrition, issues in agriculture, lawn and garden, community leadership, flood recovery, homeowner concerns, and so much more. Live from the Super Talk 1270 News Studio, this is Extension Connection.
Well, good morning, everybody. I'm Tyler Kralicek, the Ag and Natural Resource Agent from Burleigh County, and I'm joined with Shaundra Ziemann.
Good morning, everybody. This is Shaundra Ziemann-Bolinske, and I am the Family and Consumer Science Agent with the Extension Office in Burleigh County. Hope everybody's doing well today. Tyler and I had an opportunity to go up yesterday to the State Fair, and we saw quite a few Burleigh County 4-H'ers up there showing their animals. So I'm going to let Tyler elaborate a little bit. He's more the livestock guy than I am.
Yeah, it's kind of an enjoyable experience, not only just to see the kids, but having a little more livestock background, going through those barns, seeing some familiar faces. But we've had a really good week so far. 4-H show is going to be going on, and we'll talk about that later with our schedule here. But in terms of how the kids have done so far, we've had some success. We had a reserve champion with one of the kids, and then also forth from that family, and we've had a lot of different kids. I think there's 9 total on the beef project in terms of kids entered. We have some individuals that are in the goat category. That family does extremely well, where they typically go with their projects, and then also in sheep, we've got some really competitive individuals in that category as well. But really an excellent set of kids up there on the livestock side, and they have a lot of passion. So for me, it's good to see a lot of these young individuals who are involved in agriculture, and not only are just showing, but also many of them are involved in breeding projects, trying to continue to put beef on people's plates, or lamb, or any of those types of things.
Mm-hmm. So I encourage you to check out our Facebook page to see a couple pictures that were posted yesterday. So that's the Burleigh County Extension Facebook page. And we had, I want to say 9 maybe, individuals that were in the horse show.
Yeah, we had.
So horse show was yesterday on the 22nd.
The horse show did extremely well the last couple of days. I know one of the individuals, I think she had one reserve, and the rest were all grands.
Right.
And, a lot of them in the top 6 in the state in terms of who attended. So obviously those kids, I should say, have done an excellent job, not just showing up at fair and going through their runs, whether it be reining or horsemanship or any of those categories, but they put in a lot of work at home, talking with these kids, not just the horse, but livestock as well. But with these horse kids, I mean, you're looking at riding horse every night to, 3-4 times a night, because it's like anything you do. I mean, working with animals, it's a companion type deal. So each one has their own individual quirks, and they kind of have to work together to make sure they overcome whatever potential hang-ups they might have.
Right, and that's some of what they score you on, right? Your relationship with your animal, how well it listens to you, that you're leading it correctly. Yeah. So I'm new to this, and I said, what am I looking for? So what are you looking for when you're going up to the state fair and watching some of this livestock go on? So, like, let's say, for example, moving forward now, since horse show is already gone, tomorrow we have, which is let's go with today first, right?
Okay, yeah, absolutely. We still have a horse show going on today. A lot of the events for those kids have been the last couple of days. Like I said, a lot of the English type events, jumping, equitation, those types of things, were on Monday. Okay. Yesterday, when Shaundra and I went up to the state fair, got to see a little bit on the Western horsemanship, those types of classes, reining. And then today, they're going to continue on with a few more of those horse type classes. A lot of them will be, your speed type events for the most part, but a lot of really exciting things for those horse kids to partake in.
If you don't know anything about the horse show, what are you looking for? What is that judge looking for?
Well, it all depends. It's no different than, we'll compare it to Miss America pageant. Obviously you're not looking for how they walk in the intelligence portion when you get to the back. Obviously they're going to be pretty because they're coming from Miss America. But, different criteria, they're scored differently, whether it be what do they call it, the evening gown. Forgive me, I'm not as familiar with that, but I know they have to dress up really nice once. And then versus, the swimsuit portion of things. So there's different criterias. At the end of the day, it's all about a set criteria. For these kids, it's a set pattern, whether it be kids have to walk their horses, they have to get them from there to a lope, which essentially is a 3-beat gait, or have 3 compactions in terms of how their feet set down, or a trot where alternating feet come work in unison and when they step down. So they work between that, and then also with reining, obviously it's going to be a little bit more geared around how you actually maneuver your horse, and as long as you follow that pattern, you should do extremely well. And then having a little bit of the biggest thing is accuracy. And so that's why, we talked about earlier, these kids are working for hours on end before they even get to the fair. And, you can see the kids who've put in the work, who do a great job. You can't be a slouch when you're doing any of these types of events when you go up to the state fair.
Right. Okay, well, that sounds good. So if you're interested, if your child is interested in anything concerning horse showmanship, is that the right word?
Yeah, well, if you're doing any kind of horse event, essentially. But yeah, for showmanship's what a lot of it gears around.
Showmanship, yep. And that's what we referenced yesterday. Please call our extension office, okay? Our office number is 701-221-6865, and ask for more information.
Mm-hmm. And we do have a lot of people who are interested in these different projects, and we have multiple clubs that are involved with these different events that have a lot of expertise that they bring to the table in terms of making sure that you're a little bit more set up, not just with how do I do a proper reining pattern, but how do I actually select a good horse that's going to fit my needs? Obviously, we don't want, a speed horse that's going to be able to run barrels at the NFR for a kid that's 8 years old. Yep. That's just not smart. So trying to gear them up with one that's going to fit, personality-wise. Like I said, it's a bonding experience between two individuals. So.
Yeah, and that's apparent. The better the bond, the better ribboning you're going to see.
Absolutely.
So then moving into swine show until we need to take a break. So what are we looking for when we go up and look at these hogs?
Hogs? Well, it depends on what you're in. Obviously, if you have a breeding project, which that's geared around, okay, we're going to produce some down the road.
Right.
We have to have some longevity to where it's not a one-and-done type experience. And so we don't have kids from Burleigh County necessarily going up to the state fair in that aspect. We did have a fair amount participate at our achievement days here a few weeks ago that we had. But the big thing with that, it's with a market perspective, is usually your bigger shows. What do you have on your plate in the morning? A lot of people have sausage or bacon or any of those kind of things. So we need to make sure that those things are taken into account, and not to do our relation back to a beauty contest, but that's what it comes down to. They've got to have the essentials. They have to be done right from a condition perspective, because there is a correlation between eating quality and condition. And so they have to have the adequate condition. They have to have enough muscle to be considered heavy muscled or adequate in that department. So from there, how do we balance all those other things out? Well, pork bellies are traded on the exchange. Pork bellies is the direct correlation with your bacon, because that's where it comes from.
Right.
So, so then you also have to have some style. They have to be put together right. So as long as they can add up more positives, those are the ones that the judges are going to say, hey, that's my blue ribbon or that's my grand champion. So.
Okay, sounds good. And I could tell without a trained eye at our achievement days, which happened last week, in Burleigh County. It was 2 weeks ago now.
2 weeks ago.
Okay.
Time's flying, huh?
Yeah, that's right. So July 8th was the beginning of that week, and it was amazing how you could tell if, the musculature of the animals that were worked with more.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, well, on that, we're going to take a quick break, and we will be back with you in a few minutes.
Get the traffic and weather information you need anytime on Super Talk 1270 and online at supertalk1270.com.
And we're back with the Extension Connection. Again, I'm Tyler Kralicek, and I'm here with Shaundra Ziemann-Bolinske, and we are talking a little bit about essentially our day yesterday and kind of discuss some different events that are going to be going on in case you guys are heading up to the state fair for about anything, whether it be concerts or if you're interested in the livestock portion of things, because everybody likes to pet stuff, right?
Right.
So, seeing those little lambs that are hanging out in their little pens, or the pigs, or any of that kind of stuff, this is your opportunity to get a little bit more up close and personal look at these critters.
That's right. So a lot of what I saw yesterday was intriguing because I am not the livestock expert. And what we're doing here and what we did for the last 15 minutes is we talked about with Tyler, who is more of an expert in livestock, what are you looking for at the state fair as the youth are showing their animals? And we talked a little bit about the horse show that happened yesterday and is extended into today for the state fair events, and then a little bit about the swine show. Now moving into sheep, we do actually have a couple sheep contenders from Burleigh County up there representing our 4-H program. What are you looking for when you walk through that sheep barn?
Well, the biggest thing is it all depends on breed. It's no different than, a lot of your other things. So obviously you're not going to judge a Great Dane and a Toy Yorkie in the same category if you're at a dog show, for example. They're different criterias. They're different types of animals. So it's no different with the sheep show. You have some that are more geared towards the meat, like your Suffolks, your Hampshires, those kind of sheep, versus like a Columbia or a Rambouillet. They're a little bit more for helping us stay warm in the winter and produce wool. So that's kind of a little bit more what their focus is. And most of our kids, a little bit more into the meat side of things, producing market lambs. And those are the animals that will eventually go into the meat market, essentially. So, and those kids have done an excellent job. I know I work with those kids, a lot of them quite a little bit more, just because of the different program when we do like livestock judging. So a really good bunch of kids, really savvy with working with their animals, but with them to try and explain, what are we looking for? Okay, so we can talk a little bit about the wool sheep. I know one of the individuals produces wool sheep and does a really nice job. The biggest thing is finding the genetics they're going to produce those really fine fleeces, the ones that really are good for spinning, who are very consistent in terms of how they are in terms of length from their from their shoulder all the way back into their hip. They want it to be consistent, not only in terms of their micron or their density, but also their length. And obviously we want a little bit more length because you get more pounds, and more pounds get you more money. So that's one of the things you're looking at with wool sheep. When it comes to meat sheep, if you're on the market side of things, well, we want them stout, right? You want loin chops that are going to be about 4 inches in terms of their square area. I mean, you don't want just one of these little puny ones, unless it's a little kid just wants something like a popsicle, just chew on it for a little bit kind of thing. Maybe that's what you're looking for, but typically we're looking for something that's going to put more efficient growth.
Meaty.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's one of the criteria is in the market deal. They also, again, have to be conditioned right. They have to have enough fat. So if people give you crap about being a little bit too chunky, you just tell them, hey, I'm just getting my ideal endpoint. So that's what I joke with people sometimes.
Well,
but
that is very informative, actually.
Yep.
The wool versus meat. And then when you move into goat now, okay, so if unless you're not done with sheep, but I'm thinking that there's typically a couple categories here.
Yeah, and you talk about
and
the
cattle.
different. Yeah, you talk about the different species. Cattle obviously they have different parts, no different than humans. I mean, they have muzzles, we have noses. There's a little bit of a difference from that perspective.
Right.
But when you tie into the animal world, going to the goat deal, they're very similar in many ways to sheep. In terms of having different muscle groups when they're live. You talk about the rack, which is a muscle group right behind their shoulder. You talk about their loin, which is no different than about every other species. Those are the areas where your high-priced cuts are typically coming from because of the tenderness involved. So, feeding them outright is going to be very important. One of the guys I dealt with when I was in college who showed, quite a few goats, always told me, if you've got a goat that's really fat on the outside, they are unbelievably fat on the inside in terms of how they actually to do that. So, not overfeeding them is obviously an important thing, because who wants to just eat fat? I know I don't, and I'm sure you're the same way. So, but with the goats, I mean, it comes down to like every other species. We want them to be sound and put together structurally. It's kind of like some people who have, knee problems. It's one of those deals. It's unfortunate, but we're trying to, from a business perspective, eliminate those types of issues. So if you say, for example, you have a breeding piece like a doe or a billy that's knock-kneed and really bad structured, and his feet won't hold up for more than a year or two, well, looking forward, you're not going to get a lot of economical gain out of those animals, because you're only going to get maybe one set of kids out of that deal versus one that's a little sounder structured and has more durability that will actually last for 5-6 years if you get that many out of them.
So speaking of the meat goat show, some cultures really have a lot of goat in their diet.
Absolutely.
And, the last time I was out in Chicago, I went to food show, and some of that food paired with a curry, goat is very good to eat.
It can be very good. And it depends on kind of what you're up to. I mean, for me, growing up in a beef ranch, I mean, it was you eat beef. And I mean, we always joke that chicken don't pay the bills, so why are we buying it kind of thing. So... But yeah, absolutely. Diversifying your protein that you're going to actually take in and consume.
Bring something new to the table. Right.
Absolutely. So.
Right. Okay. And so the dairy goat category, all the dairy animals intrigue me. And yesterday, I saw a dairy cow at the fair, and I was concerned that she was a little skinny. But you were saying, that is the nature of how dairy cattle appear.
Well, and like anything, it's, with people, we don't want you looking anorexic. I mean, in cows, it's that correlation. You're potentially going to see a little bit of rib showing. Now, do we want it to where they look emaciated? Absolutely not.
Which wasn't the case.
No, absolutely not. Right. I mean, those animals, those kids have done a great job in terms of feeding them to where they need to be. But like, say, a beef cow versus a dairy cow, and it's no different than a meat goat versus dairy goat, you want them almost a little bit more on the, I would say, frail or a little bit the lighter side, because you don't want a dairy goat putting all their energy into producing meat. You want it into that milk, because that's the whole base of what that animal is intended for. So
perfect. So as you gain your education, you're not concerned as you're walking through the stables.
And the biggest thing is you talk to these kids. Most of them are super sharp in terms of explaining what really is going on, not only just with their animals, but also within the industry. A lot of these kids, especially if they have breeding projects, I mean, that's their livelihood.
That's right.
They understand very well in terms of, okay, so this one could use a little bit more in the way of fat or a little less or any of those types of things, or why this one walks a certain way and how they would try and bring in a different, for example, a bull on a heifer that would make that animal's genetics better, or the future offsprings.
So can we talk a little bit about, and this is a girly spin on what I observed yesterday. I saw 2 beauty products, so to speak, being used in some of these animals, because you cannot believe how nice they look when you go through before they show. So what are they using?
So talking about this, one of my biggest frustrations growing up, because I used to do a little bit of showing, and, people think that, people who put these show animals on display and all these other things, it's kind of like bucking bulls or any of those things. If I could have the equivalent diet or treatment on the human level as some of these animals, holy crap, I'd probably be so darn fat and just sassy and just wouldn't. Oh
pampered.
Man,
I feel
they
like
get pampered.
It's the animal spa,
and
right?
I actually get crap sometimes in terms of hair products, because I feel like I know as a guy more than I probably should. But when it comes down to exemplifying, or expressing the positive attributes, or trying to not necessarily hide, but try and make that animal look as positive as possible. Right. You use different products like, Pink. It's a moisturizer for hair that makes the hair glisten. It moisturizes. Right. Using Infusium 23 is something that we used to do in terms of different sheens.
On cattle?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It makes, not only do they look better, but for a haircut perspective or from a clip job perspective, it makes them look better. It's no different than a human being. I could look scruffy as all get out and get a good haircut. You might not even recognize me. With animals, it's no different. You could have one that just looks pretty average, pretty sorry, so to speak, and all of a sudden, with a clip job, oh man, that's a Denver champ or North Dakota State Fair champ. So.
Right. So you can see the dedication that the youth are putting into their animals, and it's really neat to see.
Absolutely.
So if you have an opportunity, make it up to the state fair in Minot and check out the livestock barns. There's, I think, a couple horse. How many for cattle? There's got to be 7 or 8 stables up there, or
Well, there's, I think, 9 kids involved in the beef project. What I think, do we write it about 10 or a dozen? I forget the exact number in terms of the horse individuals that are actually involved. But
specific
on the Burleigh,
for our county,
on just Burleigh County. But holy smokes, there's all kinds of animals everywhere. And like I said, the biggest thing is get an opportunity to get up close and personal with some of these animals. The biggest thing I'm going to recommend with everybody, you've got little Johnny who's 3 years old and just loves to run around, loves animals and everything else. Now, don't just go running up to something. Okay, make sure you get, and that's a very important thing. Making sure it's no different than a dog or anything else. An animal that's foreign to you or that you're not familiar with, don't just go running up to it. Make sure you ask first, hey, can I touch, pet your steer, any of those types of things. So
that's right. So there's a safety element there too. Mm-hmm. Well, when we come back, we are going to finish up our discussion on the state fair and talk a little bit about the last day of the fair that there's livestock going on and the round robin showmanship and what that means.
And we're back for another segment of Extension Connection. Again, Tyler Kralicek from the Burleigh County Extension Office.
And Shaundra Ziemann-Bolinske also with the Extension Office. Today we're talking about the North Dakota State Fair. And we're just wrapping up our segment as we bring you what's happening specifically with 4-H up there right now. We were just talking before the break about, the difference between wool versus meat as you're showing lamb. And then we got into goat, dairy versus meat as well. And that show will be coming up on the 25th. If you make it up to the State Fair in Minot, check out the livestock barns. But I'm intrigued about the last day. The last day of the fair is the 26th of July and what it means to watch that round robin. What's round robin showmanship, Tyler? He's kind of the expert here.
So what we're looking for with that's basically like master showman is how it's referred to sometimes. Okay. Obviously, you've got the different species that you show, and whether it be horses, goats, sheep, cattle, and rabbits. Typically, I don't know if they're involved necessarily with the master showmanship. That's another showmanship that you could have along with poultry. But in terms of the master showmanship going on, it's the individuals who just kind of have a knack for presenting the animals, and they have that relationship. It's interesting to watch because you get to see which kids, and a lot of times these kids that win certain events, like say for example you're in the beef division, a lot of times they'll show sheep or hogs or any of those other species on their own with jackpots, their achievement days. So a lot of them are very familiar, and if they're not, it's also a really good bonding experience for some of these kids. Say a hog person's never ever shown a sheep before. It gives you the opportunity, if you don't have a friend who does that, go up and interact with these other kids and say, hey, what the heck am I doing here? Do I grab its head and spin it around in 4 circles, or how do I show this darn thing? So it's a lot of a camaraderie thing, and at the end of the day, it's obviously a competition, but it's all for fun and just exemplifies who really has a knack for, presenting animals in the most positive fashion.
Right. Now, do they keep the different types and species separate, or are all of your your first place grand champions in the ring at the same time?
So typically it depends on how you want to do it. I know we had a round robin or master showmanship at our achievement days, and you have the different species that are involved in this. Like I said, sheep and cattle, goats, hogs, and they basically go on a rotation. You get a couple minutes, and it doesn't really give you a broad spectrum of time, but typically it's no different than walking into a job interview. Within the first 30 seconds, a lot of times, some people can tell, do they like you or not? What kind of opinion do you form of the person? So obviously, you've got to be dialed in terms of making sure you're doing a great job from the very beginning. And within 2-3 minutes, you can tell if somebody really understands. Are they comfortable trying to get a hog driving in front of the judge or moving them? Are they able to actually handle a show stick when they're showing a beef critter? Can they set up the legs on a horse? Those little things. It seems pretty minor, but again, it comes down to, are you familiar with it, and how much of a style do you put into doing these things? So,
right. Okay, well, we're going to switch gears a little bit after talking about livestock and what to expect each day up at the fair. As you walk through the livestock stables, you'll see the large structure building, the main state fair building, and what's inside of there are, for the most part, static exhibits. Okay, so you will see both 4-H exhibits as well as FFA displayed up there. We represent 4-H specifically at the Extension office, and let's define what static exhibits means. And so for the average person, I could say, for example, my mother-in-law says, I want to see the quilts. Quilts is an example of a static exhibit, and it's one category, it's one class, as 4-H puts it. under all of the opportunities that you have in 4-H, specific to anything other than livestock, right? Anything that is static or, not moving, not growing. And I could not believe when I looked again at the State Fair book how many opportunities there are. There is something for everybody in 4-H. Whether your little boy's into making his own kite, that's an option. And then what happens with 4-H is as you're going through, and it marries up to the school year, as you're going through the school year, you're working through an entire fiscal period with 4-H, and you're going to different classes, and our office and our leaders, our club leaders, will expose your child to different opportunities, different things to make. Then you're able to, in the summer, show what you've made through your projects and through your learning of the different classes. You show your project and it's judged, and then you may qualify up to the State Fair. So that's what's happened. Anybody that shows at their county who shows at least a blue ribbon or higher, they qualify up to the State Fair, and that's what's in that big building. And there are a lot of creative things up there this year.
Yeah, it's unreal. Not just the stuff that comes from Burleigh County. I mean, Morton County has a fair amount of static exhibits, and there's other neighboring counties, but it's all essentially the primo stuff from these different areas that you want to look at. I mean, I was talking with Shaundra. There was a young individual who made a cake Barbie, and it was one of those deals. If you're into that kind of thing, then that's the place to go.
She was able to show her knowledge of how to frost a cake and use fondant specifically to finish off that cake, and it was really creative.
Yep, and the biggest thing, some of these skills we talked about on the livestock end, some of these kids are in breeding projects. We had some jewelry making, so some of these could be, potential. What could be your job maybe moving forward, whether it be full-time, part-time, or any of those things. Scrapbooking, photography. So a lot of these are not just skills to learn as a kid, but they're really good life skills that'll teach you how to become a better human being, in my mind.
Let's elaborate on that for a minute, because if you were able to look into all the different classes or options of what you can make and what you can learn these transfer into life skills, and the youth who are exposed to these lessons seem to be more confident, seem to be just more able to present themselves in a professional manner. They seem more mature. And so we would love for anybody who is interested in 4-H and these opportunities as it comes up. The new fiscal year for 4-H starts in September.
Yep. Okay. It depends on your age. If you're
and so
13.
Let's talk about the age groups.
Yep. If you're 13, you fall into the senior category. If you are under that age as of September 1, then you fall into the junior category. It just kind of sorts. That way you don't have seniors in high school going up against third graders. I mean, let's be real here. Those kids should be at different levels. Yep. So, we try and keep a little bit of distance in terms of, how to make it fair for those kids. Because, like I said, you can't expect a third grader to beat a senior when it comes to a woodworking project.
That's right.
I would hope that the senior has something that could go out and be, make all kinds of money.
It's kind of interesting.
It's true. Yep.
Yeah. So let's again recap on the age group. Anybody from 8 years old on up to 18 this enrollment is open for joining 4-H. The preteen category goes typically from 8 to 12 years old, and the teen category is 13 to 18.
But do you have to be 8 years old, or can you still participate in 4-H if you're a little younger?
That's right. So we have a program called the Clover Bud Program. So bring your children no matter what age, and there's an opportunity. So talking a little bit about, the judging teens versus preteen, I will tell you, so for example, I went up and I was a state fair judge for the cooking and baking category. I must have tried about 40 muffins that day across both preteen and teen categories.
See, I don't get asked for the eating thing. I don't know how to get my name in on that.
Well, because you're the animal expert. You talked for the last half hour. So, that's kind of what I do. I do food science, food safety, and I had to give the grand champion, the very first, the top of the top, cream of the crop muffin recipe that I tried. both because of the texture, the flavor, as well as the fact that there was a health element. There was bran and whole wheat flour in this muffin, and it was very moist. This was an 8-year-old who submitted this. So every once in a while, you'll get, a surprise in there. And I think that the second place was actually also a preteen. So they blew the teens out of the water this year. So that's possible. But we do keep them in a separate category. So check out the static exhibits up there at the State Fair. It's in the largest main building, the hard structure up there. And it's next to the livestock. Check out the quilts. Again, anything that FFA did is more than interesting as well. They have a lot of horticulture, a lot of different plants, house plants in that building as well. So that leads us into probably our next segment that we wanted to talk about. We have about, 18 minutes left in the show or 15 minutes left in the show. And Tyler thought he would bring, so I guess I'll let you introduce the next report that we're going to talk about after the break.
Well, just to kind of give you a quick highlight before we go to break. Obviously I deal on the egg side, and as I tell people, if it's living or once living, a lot of times I get to deal with it because, animals, plants, any of those kind of things. And the biggest thing we've ran into, and obviously being the Bismarck-Mandan area, we've got quite a few lawns and gardens and those kind of things, which is awesome to see. And we field a lot of calls in terms of, hey, what in the world is this bug, or what is going on with my tree? Why are the leaves falling? Why is there this discoloration on my branch or the leaf? And a lot of times, and it's great to have you guys call in, and I'm not going to turn anybody away, but a lot of times you're putting yourself through more stress than the actual plant is when it comes to some of these trees or even some of your vegetables. So obviously we need to be proactive to make sure it doesn't go from a small problem to a big problem. But we'll talk a little bit more about some different things that you can do moving forward, not just from a preventative perspective, but also we all love fresh veggies, so we've got an opportunity for some of those things here moving forward. But let's go to break, and we'll come back and talk about that. And we're back for the final segment on the Extension Connection. Again, I'm Tyler Kralicek, and I'm joined with
Shaundra Ziemann-Bolinske. Good morning, everybody. We're talking today mainly about the State Fair. We recapped on what you can expect to see up there from a 4-H perspective with static exhibits, the livestock exhibits, and the horse show. Check out the State Fair this week as it's going on. The last day that you have an opportunity to see the 4-H events, which is the round robin showmanship, is on the 26th of July. For the last,
it's Saturday.
It's 18 to 26.
Yep.
Yeah, sorry. So let's go into what we're going to talk about for the last segment of the show, which is a little bit of where Tyler is an expert on horticulture.
Well, I wouldn't say expert, but I have a little bit more familiarity with it. I know I'm not quite as exciting as Tom, our regional specialist, is, but I can take my fair crack at it here.
He's good. Yeah.
So with horticulture, let's talk about kind of the nitty-gritty, what's really ailing people at this point. So we still have tree issues, and I think that's gonna stay. As long as we have trees, we're gonna have problems. So, I talked about what the heck is growing on this leaf. So we've got multiple things. The easiest one that I really like to deal with is actually having galls on leaves, especially your ash trees this year, because the best part about it is it's not a problem unless it's taking over the large majority of all of your leaves to where you're under 80% in terms of what that leaf can actually harvest the sun, make food, stay in production on its own. Then it's not a problem. It's a parasitic wasp that essentially just creates a growth on the leaf. Absolutely harmless. So from that perspective, those are good calls because I feel good. There's not an issue. Nature will take care of itself. Yeah, nature's going to take care of itself. It's a symbiotic relationship.
Okay.
What concerns me that we've had a fair amount of issues with, and I look at the amount of fog we've had and how our weather's kind of been from a humidity perspective and all those things, and combine that with the herbicide injuries we've been having. Everybody loves to have that just straight grass, really lush lawn that doesn't have a single weed in it. With that, you might run into some other issues if that's the route you go. If you're applying some sort of herbicide that, obviously is controlling some sort of broadleaf like dandelions, for example, which seems to be extremely popular in terms of the weed of death, I guess, if you want to call it, that people go after. A lot of people will spray, your dicamba, Trimec, 2,4-D, any of those things. Well, things like tomatoes, peppers have been the most common culprit in terms of, the friendly fire. And we've seen a lot of those issues. So making sure that you're spraying at a time of day where inversion or where your spray won't actually contact with your different types of weeds to make sure it doesn't just float over and have a misfire and go onto your vegetables. That's one of the things we need to consider. So
what time of day would you say that should be?
It could be at all times of the day in all reality. It all depends on what you're looking at for the temperature conditions in terms of what the fluctuation is. The best thing is if you can look to the northwest and see, or to the north and see some of those coal plants or any places that actually has a smokestack. If you see the smoke going up and disappearing, you're good. If you see it just kind of lingering there, then don't spray. The other thing is following the label. Certain chemicals do not work at all above 90 degrees or any of those types of ranges. So those are some other things. Another thing that I've seen in the past, and this is something that just kind of gets frustrating, making sure you're spraying to where it'll actually stay on. If you know there's going to be a rain shower, kind of like, say, Monday, if you did it 15 minutes before we got that downpour, A, you're not going to get any control. B, you're basically just taking a chance of contaminating groundwater or any of those things. So we need to be responsible tenants of whatever product that we're utilizing. So that's one of the things with herbicide injury. You'll see cupping of the leaves. It almost wraps into itself. That's herbicide injury. So another thing that we've seen, you'll have almost brown or dead spots on your leaves. Anthracnose has been a very big problem this last spring. And moving forward, you'll see some dying back. Blight has been a little bit of a problem. And a lot of these different fungal type issues come from the type of spring we've had. Obviously, we've had a blessing in terms of a lot of moisture. We haven't had to water our lawns near as much as we have in other years. It's been fairly timely. But with that, we've been fairly chilly. If you really look at it from a broad spectrum, with the exception of the last couple weeks, it's been below 70 or right at that range. So that's perfect conditions for a lot of these fungal issues to present themselves.
So can we talk a little bit about blight? Is that a general term?
It is. And typically you're looking at brown lesions with rings. They aren't necessarily completely organized or, a perfect circle, but they can be in different types of formations. But typically they have rounded edges in terms of how they infect the leaf. And there are a couple different types of foliar sprays that you can utilize to prevent or especially try and treat and hold back the issue. So a lot of those you can call in, but typically using like a copper or a chlorothalonol will be your main ingredients in these sprays that you're going to utilize. And a lot of your fungal issues using any of those types of products really works. The other thing that seems to be extremely common when we're seeing these problems is people are just taking a wand and going over top. The best thing in the world that you can do is go on the ground. The big reason for that, you think about it, like the sloth, okay? Kind of mucky and dirty. Well, it's always got moss on it because there's obviously moisture on that thing, okay? Leaves, it's the same difference. It's no different than when you water your lawn. We want to water our lawns early in the morning because it can evaporate a little bit on top, but still, as long as you have good grass cover, it insulates whatever's on below ground.
Right, it remains.
Yeah, so if you have that water sitting on top, it's going to create that friendly environment for fungus to come in. And that's why you want to water at the ground level, because you decrease the likelihood of that fungus attaching to that leaf that's really wet and gets cooler overnight. You're just eliminating your problem or decreasing your chance. So watering at the base or at the ground with the limited amount of water on the leaves is going to help you tenfold.
The longer that I'm at the extension office, the more I hear that. I hear it over and over again, even when watering your garden.
Absolutely, and that's the biggest thing. Yeah, and I know, on the ag side, we're seeing a little bit in the way of rust or any of those types of things, and that's, again, mainly because we had so much moisture. A lot of it because the leaf material is fairly dense this year. We have a lot of good crops. Because there's so much leaf material and a lot of water, they have a tendency to bring in those different fungal issues because, the environment's there.
Right. Every year my grandfather plants a garden, and I always thought, well, because he's a farmer, he was a farmer all his life, that's why his garden's so awesome. Maybe it's because of his ground watering, because that's the only way he waters.
Absolutely.
That's right.
So a couple other things to look forward to. Those are kind of the main things to look at. And again, the biggest thing is if you have a question, you're going, oh, I know exactly what that is. I'd always do a double check. I mean, unless you're absolutely certain you see that shepherd's crook shape, that's typically a blight. That's what you'll run into in terms of its shape on trees.
Good to
tree
know
leaves.
how to identify it. Right?
And
That's
it's
helpful.
And it's blackened with blight. That's what you'll see. So there are other issues. Mildew on lilac is becoming more prevalent this year. Again, that's a lot because of the moisture issues that we've had. There's some of the maple trees. I know there's a lot of people putting silver maples in. Depending on the actual foundation or the right soil type that you have, because the nutrient levels aren't balanced correctly, then you end up with a chlorosis issue. So iron deficiency essentially in those leaves. So
you were talking to me as we were driving over here about the strawberry patch.
Okay, let's talk about strawberries.
Let's get into that as we close, because it's kind of the time of year where now my strawberries are done, my June bearings.
Yep.
So there's some maintenance to be done here.
There are. So it's just like everything. Practice makes perfect, or preparation makes for a better situation. So what we can do now, is make sure that we're prepared for what's coming on for next year. And this applies for lawns in certain ways as well. But with strawberries, we want to make sure that we're ready for next year. So doing things now in terms of those runners or the stolons that basically reach out to try and repopulate that plant. Right. If you don't want it in a certain area, well, get it the heck out of there. Just pull those things out.
That's right.
Redefine your rows and make sure that they're organized and neat where you want them. And then also, one of the biggest recommendations is make sure that you use a tiller or something narrow if you want to control those with, 12 to 15 inches will make a big difference. That way they can leaf out again next year, hopefully have a bumper crop. Now, to help you with getting that bumper crop for next year, fertilization is something that you can utilize. Now, I don't care what type you use, whether it be manure or granular or what have you, liquid. The biggest thing is giving a little bit of nitrogen, but ultimately what we're looking at is a little bit more on the phosphorus and the potassium. Because in terms of actual plant health, development, from a reproductive perspective, those are the things that we're going to focus on.
Okay,
and so,
great.
like a 10-10 fertilizer using, say, 6 pounds for a 100-foot row would be right in the range that you would utilize.
So all three would be 10s?
10, 10, 10,
okay.
Yes. So 10 nitrogen, 10 phosphorus, 10 potassium.
Okay, good. No, I feel much better already just knowing that, because I am one who has over-fertilized in my early 20s when I first started playing around with doing my own flower gardens, for example. So that's great to know. So that's ideal. And you had said something about nitrogen really covers the surface.
Yeah.
And you want to get into the...
So if you talk a little bit about, which, the N, P, and K. So nitrogen, you're looking a little bit more... To me, to simplify it, you're looking for above growth. You're wanting things green and lush. And a lot of people this time of year are fertilizing their lawns with a high nitrogen fertilizer, which is a good idea because we want to make sure that above ground growth at the right application level with the nitrogen is good. And then phosphorus, potassium is healthy.
Good. Well, that gets us ready for next year. Thank you so much. We hope you enjoyed our segment today on the Extension show. And we hope to hear from you next week in a couple weeks when we return. Thank you.